Caffeine and sugar, teamwork to make the dream work. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are too. Big love to you OGs who keep coming back, and if you're new to my channel, very warm welcome to you. I hope everybody is doing very well. How is everybody's reading doing? I'm here today to do a tag. I was tagged by the lovely Gem over at Bookish Gems. Thank you so much for tagging me. This is the Reread tag, which was originally created by Lisa Does Life. I will link both of their channels down below. Here's the thing about rereading. If you've watched my channel before, you may know, or you may not, I'm not a rereader, not typically. There's a couple of exceptions, and when I say a couple of exceptions, that's not hyperbole. It's like 2 exceptions. But really the only rereading I do on the regular is reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which is one of those books for me. It's like my all-time favorite. I read it once a year, most years. Some people read Wuthering Heights every year at Christmas time. It's one of those books for me. As far as rereading books in general, I just feel like there's not enough time and there's too many books. And so I don't reread. There are books that I love so much that I want to reread and I fantasize about rereading and I just never do. So Gemma, I love you for tagging me in this tag. So don't get the wrong idea. I am going to switch it up a little bit. For each of the prompts, I'm going to talk about books that I would want to reread. Because if I don't do that, I just wouldn't have answers to the prompts. And don't worry, it's not like I felt pressure to do this tag. I didn't. The tag actually appeals to me. And of course, I want to be a good Booktube friend. So I wanted to do the tag, but it ended up being a challenge for me because as I scrolled through all the books that I've already read and tried to determine which books I would want to reread, I discovered books that I remember just loving so much enough that I would want to reread. Now, whether or not I will reread them, I mean, I think we all know the answer to that, but I want to. So anyways, without further ado, let's talk about the books that I want to reread. The first prompt is a cozy reread. This one was absolutely the easiest one, and I think it's the same answer that Gemma gave. For me, it's the Monk and Robot series, A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crown-Shy by Becky Chambers. I absolutely love these books. I would say if there's any book that has the most probability that I'll reread, it's these. They're short, they're easy reading, they're absolutely a hug in between covers. If you know me, you also know I don't buy books just to own them. I usually get books, read them, and then pass them on. These are the exception. I wanted to have my very own copies of these. That's how much I love them. I'm not going to go into the details about what these are about. I've talked about them numerous times. Lots of people on Booktube have talked about them. Just trust me when I say if you haven't read this duology, please do yourself a favor. You don't have to be a lover of the genre or anything like that. I can't imagine anybody with any kind of soul or heart not loving these books. So, cozy reread, Monk and Robot series. Easy peasy. Next prompt is a fun reread. So this was a little bit more of a challenge, but as I went through my books, there were multiple books that I came across that I think would be absolutely fun to reread. Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding. I would love to reread that. That was also a relatively short book that I think I could get through probably in 2, if not 1 sitting. Super fun book. I absolutely love Bridget Jones' Diary. It's cute, it's heartwarming, it's funny, it's witty, it's relatable, I think. Some people say it's dated, and maybe there are parts of it that are, but as far as like coming of age and figuring out who you are and what you want to do with your life and just the shenanigans that happen when you are in your 30s and really kind of coming into your own as a woman, it's just a super fun book to read. And I think if I were to come across it in a little free library or something, I'd probably snatch it up and reread it. Other fun books that I think would be fun rereads, anything by Carl Hiassen. I've talked about him before. Striptease, Tourist Season, basically all of his adult books. They are so much fun, laugh out loud funny. They all take place in Florida. They all deal with really, really quirky characters that you can't help but love. Even the characters that are just of deplorable nature, you kind of have a sympathy towards. They're super, super fun. If you haven't read Carl Hiassen, please give him a go. And I would definitely read Striptease again. Hilarious. And then I started going back into the stuff that I read years and years ago, like as a teenager. That's when I first read Danielle Steele. So before Danielle Steele became known as a romance writer, she actually wrote some decent historical fiction, family saga type novels that were absolutely page turners. Thurston House is one of my favorites. The Ring. I loved Wanderlust. Those books I think would be super fun to reread because they would be just nostalgic. And then finally, one of the books that I would love to reread was my absolute favorite Sidney Sheldon book, which I read a bunch of his when I was a teenager in my early 20s, but my favorite of his is Master of the Game, which is this historical fiction family saga. I just remember as a kid when I finished that book and thinking to myself like, oh my God, is this what reading is about? It was so good and just enthralling. I'm conflicted also as far as rereading some of these books that I loved as a kid because it faces that, of course, dilemma of will the me that I am now enjoy it as much as the me that I did many, many years ago? So I wouldn't want to ruin it, you know? But nevertheless, all of those books I think would be super, super fun to open again. The next prompt is a palate cleansing reread. Another challenging prompt. However, I feel like a really good palate cleanser is a humorous memoir. And the two that I have read that I absolutely loved, one is called Bitter is the New Black by Jen Lancaster, and I've read most of her memoirs. There's a couple of other ones that she's got, but Bitter is the New Black was the first one that I read by her. Laugh out loud funny. It basically follows her as her and her boyfriend at the time, now husband. They had a household income of 6 digits, living the life, doing whatever they wanted to do, whenever they wanted to do it. And something happens and then they are living on a very, very tight budget. And this memoir just follows her journey of all the adjustments that she had to make and what it felt like to make those adjustments. And those are really the memoirs that I really, really love to read. Stuff that's relatable. And she's just got this sense of humor that is right up my alley. Super, super funny. I would definitely reread Bitter is the New Black. Another one that I would reread is Wow, No Thank You by Samantha Irby. Hilarious, laugh out loud, and come to think of it, I probably don't have to reread it because she's got like 2 or 3 other collections of essays and memoir type books. Meaty, I think, and then she's got Quietly Hostile, which is her latest release that I definitely want to get my hands on. Definitely Wow, No Thank You. I would reread that one. So funny. I actually listened to it and it's narrated by Samantha herself, and I think it adds to the authenticity of her story. So much fun. And those types of stories are very, very effective at cleansing your palate before getting into something a little bit more deeper and darker, which are books that I typically read. Come to think of it, I probably should have Quietly Hostile on hand because I have some dark reads on the horizon. So next prompt was the most challenging of all, and that is a series reread. I don't read a whole lot of series, at least the books that I read that are parts of series. I don't think there are any series that I've finished yet. So I wouldn't want to reread a series before I actually finished all the books in that series. Here's what I did as far as answering this question. I cheated on this one too. What can I say? So I've talked about this before. I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and I have talked about The Green Mile before. And I think what many people don't realize is that The Green Mile was originally published as a serial book. And that's when I first discovered it. I pulled it off of a shelf in a grocery store, the first installment, which were little thin little books, and you had to wait like a month. I think they were released either every month or every other month. So it was a really, really fun way of reading the book because it ended on a cliffhanger. And I think a lot of books were published that way back in the day. But that's how I read The Green Mile. I read it as a serialized novel in increments, slowly over time, and it was super, super fun, and I really, really loved it. And I would reread it that way. And it was fun not only because of how it was broken up into parts, but of course, if you know, The Green Mile was an absolutely fantastic story. Maybe many of you have seen the movie but didn't read the book because you don't like to read Stephen King. They did the book justice with the movie. I will say that. But if you love the movie and you haven't seen it in a long time, read the book. It's so good. It's one of the few that I think really can't be classified as a horror. So yeah, it's not a series, but it's a serialized book that I would definitely reread. The next prompt is an emotional reread. So this was a tough one too. The first one that came to mind was The Kite Runner, and I definitely want to reread that sometime in the future. But then the one that I actually wanted to share with you, and it's a book I've talked about before, and that is The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. I absolutely love this book. I listened to it. The narrator, his voice did it so much justice. I mean, his voice is just one of those where whatever story he's telling, it just gets into your soul. So full disclosure, I think the audiobook even elevated the story that much more, but nevertheless, it's a beautiful story that takes place in Syria at the time of it being ravaged by war, and it follows a couple, Nuri and Afra, and their love for each other and their journey out of Syria to flee the war-torn country and get to Britain in order to be safe. It talks a lot about grief, a lot about love, what we do for love, what we do for the people we care about, the sacrifices that we make. It's just a beautiful, beautiful love story. And it's just one of those ones that as an audiobook, I would re-listen to it, because the narrator did such a phenomenal job. The final prompt is a comfort reread. So this is very similar to the very first prompt, which was a cozy reread. So I kind of had a hard time differentiating the two, but I am now comfortable with my decisions. The Monk and Robot series is the cozy one, and for comfort, I went with To Kill a Mockingbird. As I said earlier in this video, this is a book that I reread most years, mostly around Christmas time. This is just one of those books that I read as a kid. It has stuck with me my entire life. I love the story. It gives me comfort. I think that can be said about any book that anyone rereads on the regular. What is that book for you? I would love to know. Do you have a book that you reread at certain times of the year, every year? I would love to know what your comfort read is. So please feel free to comment down below. But yeah, this prompt was an easy one for me. And it's the prompt that actually I can answer correctly because I actually have reread this. And not only have I reread it, I have collected different editions of the book, and that's been kind of a fun hobby for me. I have one in a couple of different languages, which is super fun. I have the graphic novel. This is the vintage edition that I absolutely love, that I found. Where did I find this one? I think I found it in an airport somewhere. Anyways, To Kill a Mockingbird, my comfort read. Now for the folks that I'm going to tag. Now I'm going to tag some people. I preface it by saying absolutely no pressure, but if this tag looks like something that is right up your alley, please feel free to do so. I will tag Jim of Jim of Books. I'll tag Gina over at Gina Stan Your Books. And I tag Abby Salter. And last, but definitely very far from the least, I will tag Lezlie over at The Nerdy Narrative. These are all channels that I absolutely watch on the regular. If you haven't checked them out yet, I will link them all down below in the doodly-doo. Please give them a little love. Again, ladies, no pressure whatsoever. That is it for the tag video. Like I mentioned earlier, I would love to hear what your comfort read is. If you have a book that you reread every year, every certain season, please feel free to comment down below, or you can just say hi down in the doodly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.